You are listening to the Cattle Call Podcast. This is the place where computer-aided design and drafting meets humor and practicality, with a touch of business acumen thrown in for fun. Jim and Rocco, the owners of Zentech Consultants, the premier U.S. technology consulting firm for architecture, engineering, construction, and manufacturing, discuss the fascinating world of CAD with some humor and some honesty. The Cattle Call Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Cattle Call Podcast with Jim and Rocco from Zentech Consultants. I am Jim, your silly tech guy host, and with me, as always, is my partner,
the better-looking one, folks. It's Rocco.
It's Rocco, who is also delusional, but we let him have his little moments in the sun. He makes me money, so I don't yell at him too much, even though he thinks he's handsome. So,
all right, if you guys email me, I'll send you pictures, and then we can do a little survey.
Yo, easy. You start emailing pictures, right? You know what kind it may be in this day and age, brother. You're gonna get us sued, easy. Oh, goodness. See, this is what happens. You let me talk too much, and I go into bad places. So, all right. So what are we looking at today? Oh, so today, I actually want to talk to our listeners who always seem to get ignored by the rest of the design world, right? Kind of the redheaded stepkids of the engineering world, and that's the surveyors out there. Nobody ever shows the surveyors any love, and we just want you all to know, Rocco and I love you guys, so we want to talk to you today, all right? So I want to talk about best practices and tips for the surveying process. Not so much from the field surveying end, I let surveyors do their surveys, but from the tech and the data processing side once it comes into the office. Because it always seems to be a struggle for surveyors, right? And they always seem to get forgotten in the conversations with surveyors, right? How to do that data, bringing it from the field into the office. So you look, at the end of the day, surveyors are probably the most important people in the design process, all right? Even though nobody ever wants to admit that. They are the foundation of everything that ever gets built, right? If you don't know where things are in the real world and what elevations they're at and what conditions you have out on the site, you're just not going to get that brilliant new architectural masterpiece you designed built, right? And look, I don't care if you're the greatest civil engineer in all of history, right? With the most cutting-edge highway design ever conceived. If you don't have the existing roadways properly surveyed, you're just going to have like a 10-foot high cliff in the middle of your interstate, right? Which is not good unless you happen to be, from the Dukes of Hazzard, right? Oh, that's actually cool, Rocco. You think we can get Waylon Jennings to do like a voiceover for that? We can shoot the car shooting over the video. Them Duke boys is in trouble again. Am I dating myself with that reference? I mean, how many people actually know what the Dukes of Hazzard are anymore? I don't know.
I know.
I love that show. That's a great show. So, but yeah. Survey, is the basis of all construction. And we need to, I think, give a little bit more respect to the folk out there who make the rest of our jobs possible, right? So for today's podcast, we're going to talk about the best tech processes that can make survey work a little bit easier to complete, right? It helps get your base maps drawn a little bit faster, right? Make the surveyor's job a little bit easier, all right? So Rocco, what percentage of our client base are dealing with survey at some level, right? And do they seem to need a lot of help on that tech side of things?
Yeah, I think that there's a pretty large base, and for whatever reason, I find that a lot of surveyors are, kind of using outdated technology, right? It's they're using older versions of AutoCAD or Civil 3D in particular. And, they've got a ton of work. They're, like everybody these days, understaffed. And they're also hard to find, right? A lot of skilled surveyors out there. So that's kind of what I'm seeing.
Yeah, right. Just like everybody, just like me, right? Understaffed, overworked, and underpaid, Rocco. Just saying. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So let's talk about the most basic component, I guess, of the survey process, which is data collection. And listen, guys, I'm not going to tell you what hardware to buy or anything like that because every firm is different with different needs in that respect. What I do want to talk about is the coding process for surveyors. I'm always surprised by how many firms have a disconnect between their field and their office in terms of the point codes that they use. A lot of times I work with companies who even have different survey crews using different codes. Each survey, crew chief just uses their own codes, and that is a recipe for disaster if there ever was one. Point codes. All right, for those of you who aren't familiar, that's what surveys enter into their data collectors. I'm going to be using that term a lot today, the point codes. As they're taking, ground shots, they're entering point codes and the information into their data collector. And that information includes things like, the northing and the easting coordinates, the elevation of the shot, and most importantly, the description, or what it is that they're actually shooting at any given moment. In other words, was that shot taken at the top of a curb, or was it at the bottom of a ditch or the corner of a building, wherever they were standing when they took that shot. That's vital information. And it's usually entered into your collector using an abbreviation, right? For example, TC, right, is a common, abbreviation for top of curb, right? And GS is for a general ground shot, or TR for a tree. And using the same set of point codes is vital to consistent data entry. And I think even more importantly, those codes can be used to automate data import and drafting for the base maps on your project. In surveying CAD systems like Stringer Topo and Civil 3D or Carlson, the field codes can be mapped using what are commonly called descriptor keys. Right? And a descriptor key reads every point as you import it into your drawing, and it links it to a symbol, right, to automate the drafting process. And in other words, if the survey crew has a point that they shot and they put in the abbreviation SMH, right, for storm manhole, right, at a set point, the CAD system can read the SMH code, right? All right, you map it to your company's standard storm manhole symbol, right, along with some nice labeling features, so that that manhole is instantly drawn at the correct coordinate location in your drawing during the point import, without your survey staff or your draftsman having to do anything. You import the point, the key is there, right? The idea is to make sure that everybody in your firm uses the same codes on every job. And the best way to do this, to start this process, is to get your survey crew chiefs together and have them settle on a standard code list, right? Very often you just spell it out in Excel. And that can be pre-formatted, right, for quick use in their data collectors as well, so that when they go to take the points, they just hit a little drop-down menu and choose the code, right? So rather than having to type out the abbreviations, right? And then your CAD staff on the the interior side of this, right? Once we move into the office from the field, your CAD staff can match the descriptor keys within your survey drawing template to the codes that your surveyors are using in the field to automate your entire import process. It's
so
really
here's a silly question for you, right? Not being from the technical world, but why isn't there a standard for codes? Like a national standard.
Right. And I think it's because there are so many different aspects of survey, right? There are different surveys. There are topographic surveys, tree stakeout, there are stakeouts, as-built, Alta surveys. There's all kinds of different survey work that require a lot of different codes. And you'd wind up with a set of codes for like 3,000 or 4,000 items that are potentially out on your site. And nobody wants to deal with that. It's too many to go through in a list. So most companies just kind of parse it down into the type of work they do and the codes that they use on a daily basis. That's kind of why it comes back. We've talked a lot of times about standards, and that a big part of standards is eliminating things you don't need every day instead of trying to build one answer for everything. And I think that's why. Okay, make sense?
Makes sense.
Makes sense. Cool. Hey, Rocco said, "I make sense today." That means I can go home. I'm done.
Oh boy.
All right. So yeah, it's a pretty simple, right? Getting these codes set up and integrated is a real simple step, and it's vital in automating that survey process. But it's something that folks just don't know how to do or aren't aware of why, and that's why we're talking about this today. So Rocco, in terms of that, how often do survey companies come to us to kind of help them on along those lines? Are we seeing a lot of firms that already have their codes all squared away, or do you see that they're still struggling to get codes and descriptors fully built in place?
No, it's something that people struggle with, and it's definitely we see a lot of messy setups, right? I mean, you have your hands in it.
No
in
doubt.
A lot of environments. Yep.
So, and that's really it, right? And I think it comes down to, surveyors need to be able to survey, right? They don't necessarily know the back end of the CAD stuff. And there's also a lot of, and I think this comes back to, Rocco, what you were saying earlier, why this, so many surveyors seem to be behind the eight ball in terms of tech. It's because they're so busy. They have so much work. What they do has to be so exacting and detailed that, the drafting side of it gets kind of short shrift. They're really focused on making sure that the legal descriptions and the deeds and everything is correct. And that's where their attention should be, right? So they don't really learn how to do this. But, luckily it's not that hard of a thing to do, and you can get a lot of folks involved, whether it's a consultant or your internal CAD guys. Right? It can be passed off and leave the surveyors to kind of focus on what they do. So it's about getting your templates correct. Talking to the templates, right? The next item that kind of needs to be addressed in your CAD templates, once you get your point code settled, is the concept of your point groups. And all the major survey CAD systems, right? Stringer, Topo, Civil 3D, whatever you're working in, they let you assemble surveyed points into groups that have similar display and label features. Essentially what you're looking to do here is control the point display for all the points that don't have specific symbols from the descriptor keys, right? All the other points besides the one you've set up descriptor keys for. Maybe you want your building corners to look different than your fence posts, right? With different symbols. And maybe, the building corners should show only elevations, right? Whereas the posts should just say fence post on the plans with no elevation at all. Point groups control that automatically for you. And the best practice for handling this, right, that I always encourage for my survey guys is to predefine empty point groups within your survey drawing templates, so that when you import your points, they will automatically get sorted into the appropriate group, and they get drawn and labeled on your drawing automatically. And the great thing with that, right, with the point groups, is that the sorting happens based primarily using the same survey point codes that you use for the descriptor keys. Right? The point group it reads the codes on import, and any item that begins with let's say BLD for building code, right? It goes into the building's point group using a specifically defined point style and a label style. Your fences, right? We'll say if it's FNC for fence, that code gets automatically put into the fence group with a completely different set of display settings and so on. So, now you guys see why I said that developing that good set of point codes with your survey crews is so vital, right? It's going to impact everything you do on the survey tech side. Right? And I said the key thing to remember here with point groups is that you can just create empty groups in your templates and just leave them there, so that when you create a new drawing from that template and then points are imported, everything automatically populates on the screen with the correct display and the correct label settings. Right? It's great automation. Rocco, we do a lot of consulting work, like you were saying earlier, for survey firms, right? And helping them get their CAD standards set up and so on. And we also have public surveying classes, right, available for tech folks on how to do this on their own, right? So if they don't want to engage with us as a consultant, we can help them learn how to do it on their own, right?
Yeah, we have our Civil 3D for Surveyors class. That's actually pretty popular. We consistently run that class, and there's our Civil 3D Points Explained course.
Yep.
That you guys can check out, and of course it's at zentechconsultants.net. And feel free to check it out. The Points Explained class is a 2-hour class, and the Civil 3D for Surveyors course is an 8-hour class.
Yeah, and we cover working with templates and point groups and descriptor codes and how to set that all up for yourself. Okay, so just wanted to throw that out there so you guys know you don't have to just hire us as consultants. You can come do the training with us too. And another quick tip I want to kind of throw out there for those of you who are using Civil 3D in particular for your survey work. That I love, and it can just save you so much time. in your templates, you can take those blank point groups that we're talking about, and you can use the empty point groups to build an empty surface called existing ground, or EG, or however you want to name it. This way, when your survey points are imported into your drawings, right, the symbols and the points not only get drawn on screen, but your surface for your survey is automatically created at the same time. Right? So the idea is that, when the points come in and they populate inside the point groups automatically populate the surface. And just with that, you have 75% of your drafting work done just on a single point import. It takes about 10 seconds. And I always like to throw this story out as kind of a reference point, right? The last design firm, active design firm that I worked for before, coming over here and founding Zentech with Rocco, we had a survey group of about 40 people, big group. And we never did individual lot surveys or private work, right? Because it took too long and we couldn't make any profit off of it. It was just not enough time. Our survey guys strictly handled large-scale subdivision and commercial survey. That's all they would do, okay? Once I updated and implemented these survey code setups we're talking about here into the standard survey drafting system, they could crank out lot work in literally minutes, because it would all be generated based on their simple point import, and it became their single best source of survey income. Right? Here's the number for you. In 1 year, my survey group went from not doing private and individual lot surveys to pulling over $2 million a year in billings from it. Right? And that is the kind of return that we all dream of. Okay? So I actually certainly use that, no doubt. All right, tell you what, let's take a quick break here to listen to today's sponsors. And when we get back, we get into automating more of the survey drafting process. All right, so stand by, folks. We'll be back in just a minute with more of the Cattle Call Podcast. All right, everybody. Today's episode of the Cattle Call Podcast is brought to you by Zentech Consultants. That's Rocco and I. We're bringing ourselves to you. Aren't we nice? So we wanted to talk to you guys today about some of the things that we offer at Zentech Consultants. In particular, we wanted to talk to you today about our offerings around developing and upgrading your CAD standards. We are here to help you guys with all of your CAD standard needs, from ongoing drafting and design support to block and library development, full CAD standards development, right, CAD version upgrades, really whatever it is that you guys need when it comes to developing, implementing, and tweaking your current CAD standards. Or like I said, if you don't have any yet, we can help you build them from scratch. So Rocco, why don't you tell all the good folks how they can reach out to us and start that conversation?
Yeah, there's a lot of information, people, on our website, zentechconsultants.net. That's ZENTEK consultants.net. Or you can give us a call, 866-824-4459, or even drop us an email, sales@zentechconsultants.net.
Ooh, nice. CAD standards from Zentech Consultants. You're listening to the Cattle Call Podcast. Welcome back, everybody, to the Cattle Call Podcast, where we're talking about survey technology today and the best ways to optimize developing your drawings from that survey data. And in this half of the show, I want to get into the tools available for automating the drafting process, or what's very often referred to as the field to finish concept. And look, there are a number of systems out there that have built-in processes for survey that go beyond just placing descriptors and symbols, and they actually begin to draw the line work, right? Your lot lines and property lines and edge of curves and so on your drawing by playing connect the dots, right? Essentially with your survey points right on your screen. Now, the good news is that this is all going to make your use of your survey point codes again, right? It's just a matter of which CAD system you're going to use that's going to do the best job for you in terms of how simple they make it to kind of pre-format your data collection codes in a way that the system can understand, so that it knows which points to connect for drafting purposes. And that sounds very complicated, right, when I try to explain it like that, but it's really not. At the end of the day, what we want to do is tell the system to connect, for example, all the bottom of curb shots, right, with either a 2D or a 3D line on screen. The difficulty comes in, I guess, in letting the system know which points to connect in what order, right? In other words, we don't want the bottom of the curb line running from the left side of the road across the road to the right side, right? We need it to go down the left side as one line and then down the right side as a different line. To resolve this, what we do is we add a figure name to our point entries in the field, right? In other words, we call the left side points, we'll use the BC, bottom of curb code, and we'll name it BC-L Road 1. L for left, it's the left side of Road 1. And the right side shot becomes BC, bottom of curb, dash R Road 1, right? The right side of Road 1, okay? R being for right. To differentiate them, right? And once they're split and you can tell them apart, then the CAD system, whichever one you're using, knows to connect all the L road bottom of curb points together and all the right road bottom of curb points together. Okay? So it really, at that point, it's going to come down to good data, consistent, really, data entry on the part of your field crews using the standard codes and reliably naming all of those figures, right? The road name and so on. And honestly, that's probably the biggest resistance point I get in this process, as it does mean extra work for the field guys and the survey crew. And at first glance, right, people resist that because the survey crew is more expensive than a draft person. Okay, and yes, that's absolutely correct. It costs more to run a crew for an hour than it does for a draftsman to work for an hour. The thing is, right, we're talking about an increase of maybe 2 to 3% of the field person's time. It's very quick when these are preset codes. It's very easy to do, versus a savings of 80 to 90% of all your future drafting time. All right, trust me on this one, folks. The production savings are going to far outweigh any increase, cost you see in terms of the survey field work. So, Rocco, what do you think? Are the field to finish processes and functions a big concern for our clients? Do we see a lot of folks coming to us looking for help in that area?
We do, yeah. I mean, whether it's a small or a large firm, it's definitely a topic that comes up often.
Okay. Well, that's a simple yes. Well, thank you for that. I'm glad you could join the conversation. Come on, man. I talked too much already. You're going to make me keep on talking? Now you're going to throw me a bone?
I'll let you keep on talking.
You're like, that's a problem for me. There's never a problem with Jim talking. So, all right. So, the big differentiator, I guess, in terms of your survey CAD systems in this field to finish drafting automation process, I think it really comes down to two big items, right? Number one is, does the system you're working with draw with basic polylines or a specific survey related tool, right? And number two, can that system separate between 2D drafting and 3D drafting processes? Okay, so I'll talk about different systems here, right, and which ones handle what in a few minutes. But I kind of want to explain what I just said. All right, so the ideal scenario is when the CAD system draws your line work automatically using simple polylines, right? Because most of us know how to recognize, edit, control, and work with polylines, whether they're 2D or 3D. We know they're basic drafting tools. Everybody knows how to use them. But some CAD systems generate survey-specific lines that are called figures, right? And they require specific editing tools. And that means that the user has to learn a whole different set of drafting procedures to work with the figures, okay? And most folks hate that. And it's a big reason, I think, why a lot of survey firms will still manually draw their own line work on the plan. They just connect, snap to this point, to this point, to this point, and draw the lines themselves. The second item that I brought up is the 2D versus 3D question, right? And you need to know, does your CAD system do one, does it do the other, or does it do both? And it's an important question because there's a big difference, particularly in the survey world, between 2D and 3D line work, right? Because when we go in and we're pulling bearing and distance labels on our plans, right, we're labeling out 2D, two-dimensional lengths from point to point. And if we're pulling that on a 3D line, it can cause you issues, right? Your lengths are going to return as being much longer than they are in the 2D plane because there's a 100-foot difference between the two elevations. So they're going to come out 100 foot longer. On the other hand, right, we do want true 3D line work because we need that to generate surfaces and contouring and so on at the correct elevations. Right? So we do need both, and that's why I tend to prefer systems that can handle both options, ideally at the same time, or at the very least let you pick to use 2D or 3D, right? And then you can use it multiple times if that's what you need, right? So that way you can go in and you can handle all of your 2D drafting on your plans in one pass, right? And then come back and handle all the 3D surfacing work afterwards, okay? So, Rocco, what do you think? Is the need for this automated line work in both 2D and 3D a big concern for our survey folks? Is it something that they ask about, or is it something that we actually need to kind of point out to them as a concern during a consult?
No, I mean, I think people see it as a need. I mean, everybody's looking for automation, right? I mean, you go back to the workforce shortage, and I think it's even more prevalent, on the survey end, in our field. So automation is huge. It's key.
Yeah, and actually having, like I said, those ideal situations where it's doing that automated drafting for you, it makes a world of difference. So, all right, so in terms of different CAD systems and how they work with this field to finish concept, I'll say that Civil 3D, which while it is the most widely used CAD system out there in the civil and site world, it's probably the most limited in terms of generating this field to finish line work. It generates the survey figures that I was talking about early exclusively. That's what it does. All right? And it is the least friendly process, for people who are looking to automate that survey drafting concept, right? So people who have messed with it and played with it, they do it a little bit and they just drop it and say it's not worth the time and effort. There are other systems out there, right, which are like plug-in type of modules, and some of them go into Civil 3D. That I think do a much better job of this type of automation drafting. In my mind, right, systems like P-Connect is a great one, Carlson, and my absolute favorite personal preference here is Stringer Topo from Civil Site Solutions. And what I like about all three of those systems, right, is that they generate, number one, they generate polylines instead of the figures, right? And Stringer Topo, and what I really love about that, it has the ability to draw 2D lines or 3D lines using your survey point codes, right? And map them to specific drafting layers as they're being drawn, right? And it has the ability to do both 2D and 3D at exactly the same time so that you can generate everything you need in a single point import process, right? So, what Stringer Topo does is it lets you build a mapped file, all right, that can be saved and reused so that you can have your company's point codes, the ones we've been talking about all day here, all right, automatically connected to draw 2D lines on your company standard drafting layers, right? So that you can create and save different ones for different types of jobs, right? Some for Alta surveys, some for topo surveys with different layers and controls and so on. The idea is you just process your points using Stringer Topo as your import methodology, and it handles adding in all the descriptor keys, the point group settings, the 2D line work, all at one time. In just a couple of seconds, you have pretty much a complete base map drawn. Okay, on the 3D side of this, you choose the codes, right, that you're using for items like bottom of curb, top of curb, street center lines, building pads, and so on. Your primary topographic info, right, and those lines can be drawn twice with a single import. Right, it draws them once as a 2D line on the correct layers for your actual printed survey base map and plans, and then it draws those specific ones again on a 3D specific layer that you can use as break lines, right, for your surfacing. It's just an absolutely brilliant and very easy to configure system that really makes your survey drawings move just dramatically faster.
And it's affordable.
And it's affordable. That it absolutely is. So I've actually, I know we've seen, you're speaking of selling Springer Topo, Stringer Topo, excuse me. We've seen a big uptick in sales of those in the last year. And how much of that do you think comes down to how easy it is to use those automatic drafting tools?
Yeah, I think it comes down to ease of use, but it goes back to what I was saying before too. Is it's automation, right? I mean, you got to get it done quicker, and you have less staff. So, you look to technology? I mean, that's not something that's common just within the AC world, but beyond, right? So, but yeah, it's that automation that's important.
Yeah.
And it plugs like, Stringer Topo and even, all these packages, right? They plug right into the CAD platform. So, you know.
It's really, really amazing. Like I said, how do you get, there's no loss there, right? Like you said, you're getting better, faster automation, right, at a really low price, right? And it's easy to use. And then you can set it up and configure it for multiple types of surveys. So, yeah, it's a win-win at the end of the day. As I said, we've seen just a huge, huge uptick in that area. So, all right. So at the end of the day, folks, survey accuracy, right? That's vital to everything that we do. But here's the key, right? For years, we all believe, accuracy equals time, right? But it doesn't need to take weeks to generate a base map in your existing surface conditions. It shouldn't take weeks, right? With a bit of planning and communication between your CAD staff and your field staff, you can automate huge amount of that process and substantially increase your profits, right? And you're not risking in any way the accuracy of the survey, right? The idea is you want to free your survey staff up from these, repetitive long-term drafting tools so they can focus on verifying accuracy, right? Rather than wasting all their time trying to figure out all these manual drafting processes. Right? So, and I'll throw in my last plug just to make Rocco happy. As always, if you guys find that you just need some help getting that all set up, Rocco and I are always here, ready to work. Well, at least I am. Rocco's probably going to be napping on the deck of his yacht, but I will be here ready to work and being underpaid by Rocco.
Which yacht?
Which yacht? There you go. Your picture. He naps on one in the morning and another in the afternoon, folks. It's amazing. This guy, living the life of Riley over there. All right, folks, we're going to leave it there for today, and we will catch you all next time on the Cattle Call Podcast. All right, everybody, today's Cattle Call was brought to you courtesy of Zentech Consultants. That's Rocco and I. Zentech Consultants works with design and manufacturing firms to help our clients purchase and implement the software that they need in these complex industries. We provide a single point of contact for clients to buy, develop, and learn the most vital software systems for your specific needs. Zentech strives to be your trusted technology partner from your initial needs all the way through long-term support and training for your entire staff. So Rocco, why don't you tell them how to reach out to Zentech?
All right, yeah, you can reach out to us through zentechconsultants.net. You can email us at sales@zentechconsultants.net. Or you could even call us, 866-824-4459.
Excellent. We look forward to hearing from you all.